G'day guys and gal, Custodians are the pinnacle of mankind's warriors. They're perfect in nearly every way. Their speed, durability, intelligence, willpower and loyalty is unmatched, with even condescending dicks from the other races revering them. Many people think they are actually unkillable, with the Imperium even having an unofficial policy to automatically declare a war zone an Imperial victory if the Custodians arrive in force, which to be fair has been a pretty solid policy. However, an absolute shitload of Custodians died during the Horus Heresy, to a point where they nearly became extinct. It was extremely jarring. Nigh unkillable warriors mowed down in their thousands until only a handful remained by the end. But how many exactly did die? More specifically, how many died in each specific engagement they fought in during the Horus Heresy? Before we get started, it's been a while since I've spoken about dice dioramas, but boy are we cooking. The next diorama will be a Custodian diorama, more specifically the end of the Unification Wars on Mount Ararat. If you know the lore, you know it gets a bit messy. That diorama is going live as a giveaway in a few weeks, but until then, DICE is giving away an awesome World Eater army as a bit of an entree to the main meal. This army includes Angron, Khan, Berserkers, a Demon Prince, a Combat Patrol, and some Goremongers. Everything you need to please the Blood God. However, we want to make sure that all DICE members across all tiers have a good chance of taking something home, so each individual tier also has their own unique prize, Bronze being Khan, and going all the way up to Angron for Mythic members. All DICE members are in the running to take this World Eater army home, and if they maintain their membership, will also be in the running to take home the upcoming Custodian diorama. All you gotta do is join DICE dioramas by picking one of 6 membership tiers. The higher the tier, the higher chance of taking the World Eaters home. You can also purchase a one-time membership boost, which means you won't be recharged on a subscription, but instead just pay one time, which will enter you into the main army World Eater giveaway. You can do membership boosts on top of each other or on top of your current membership to increase your odds. So click the link below to join DICE now and enter the World Eater army giveaway. For some extra context, we've given away an Angron vs Lion diorama, Rylanor's Last Stand, Horus vs Sanguinius, Magnus vs Lehman, and the next one will be Mount Ararat. Today we'll go over each of the battles and wars the Custodians have fought in during the Horus Heresy and determine how many warriors they lost each battle and how many Custodians were left by the end of the Heresy. Let's get into it. Prior to the Horus Heresy, the Custodians were seen as nigh unkillable. When the Emperor attacked the Orcs on Ulanor with a host of Custodians against millions of Orcs, only 3 Custodians died. When a small squad of Custodians faced off against millions of Tyranids, including the Swarm Lord, 1 Custodian managed to survive and they actually were victorious. So it takes a lot to bring these boys down, especially when the writers finally start agreeing on how powerful a Custodian is supposed to be. When the Great Crusade ended, the Emperor went back to Terra and began work on the Webway project, his permanent solution to defeating Chaos. The Emperor wanted to keep this project secret so that not only would Chaos not be entirely aware of it, spoiler, they became aware of it pretty quickly, but also keep it from the prying eyes of powerful Imperial sub-factions who would see the project ruined. For example, the Navigator houses, who were insanely powerful but would become obsolete if the Webway project succeeded. As such, the Emperor only allowed hand-picked mechanic enforcers to help him, as well as his Custodian Guard and Sisters of Silence, who were utterly loyal and incorruptible. He did not allow any Space Marines to be involved. There are also a few dozen to about 100 Custodians out in the galaxy at this time, either watching over Lorgar or providing aid and advice to other Primarchs, or just running their own missions, but the vast majority of them were on Terra helping with the project. Now many of these Custodians out in the galaxy would die, either through attrition of the Great Crusade or just straight up killed, like the ones watching over Lorgar, but since there were 10,000 of them total, that isn't a big deal. However, the real kick to the balls would happen when Magnus breached the wards of the Webway, allowing an endless tide of demons to assault the Emperor's Webway project. The Emperor had to split the Custodians up. He sent Valdor and about 1,000 Custodians with a few thousand Sisters of Silence to Prospero with Lehman to retrieve Magnus. The remaining 9,000 or so Custodians and Sisters of Silence, we don't really know how many, they were always very hush-hush on actual sister numbers, were tasked with holding the Webway. Not many Custodians died during the burning of Prospero. See, Custodians are naturally resilient to psychic powers and entirely immune when there are sisters present, so the Thousand Sons had lost their greatest asset. Because the Thousand Sons relied so heavily on their use of the Warp as their weapon, they were known to be pretty fucking shit when it came to actual physical combat. When 6,000 elite Thousand Sons, saying that kind of melts my brain a bit, attacked 500 Custodians led by Valdor and supported by 2 Vigils of Sisters, all 6,000 Thousand Sons were slaughtered. The kill ratio was like 1 Custodian dead for between 24 to 48,000 Sons killed in return. However, the Thousand Sons were suicide charging at the Sisters of Silence, as they knew that if they killed the Sisters, they would regain their power and stand somewhat of a chance. So in this engagement, only a few dozen Custodians died, but around 500 Sisters of Silence were killed, at the cost of the entire Thousand Son force, 6,000 Marines. This kill ratio was repeated throughout the rest of the battle, Custodians dying here or there, taking shitloads of Thousand Sons with them. Overall, I would say that Valdor lost around 100 Custodians, definitely less than 200 during the fall of Prospero. The war in the Webway was a different story. See, it wasn't like 9,000 Custodians versus 1 million demons, it was 9,000 Custodians versus infinite demons. Even still, at the start of the war, the Custodians were actually regularly counterattacking, retaking ground, pushing back the demonic tide. The Emperor, who loathed to sacrifice even a single Custodian, was allowing them to die in droves to retake ground in the hope that the Webway could be secured and the breach sealed. If the breach could be sealed, all could be restored. If not, all would be lost. However, after years of war, even if the kill ratio was 1 Custodian to 1,000 demons, was still slowly losing. Their numbers could not be replenished, whilst the demons could. It got even more complicated when the Traitor Legions figured out how to use the breach to deposit their own Space Marines in the Webway, alongside Traitor Titan Legions. One by one, the Tribunes, the Custodian commanders, were killed, until only Ra Endymion remained. To make matters worse, Dracnian, the Ender of Empires and one of the most powerful demons in existence, also entered the Webway and was able to kill Custodians like cannon fodder, one-shotting them and shredding them apart. By this late stage of the war in the Webway, around 80% of the Custodians and Sisters in the Webway had been killed. However, you have to remember that Valdor didn't actually take part in this. Likely his 800 or 900 odd Custodians didn't either. So it's more like 80% of 9,000 died, not 80% of 10,000. At this point, the Webway was declared lost and Ra led a fighting retreat, during which many more Custodians died. By the time they had fallen back and the Emperor came to save them, the lore specifically says 9 out of 10 Custodians in the Webway had been killed. So there was about 900 surviving Custodians, plus the 900 or so of Valdor's own who weren't in the Webway. So almost 2,000 Custodians were alive for the Siege of Terra. That sounds like a decent amount. However, most of them stayed within the Inner Palace, with a few hundred being distributed amongst the defenders. The Inner Palace also got invested with demonic invasions, so those Custodians weren't just idling, they were very busy. The lore does show some Custodians dying during the siege, but not that many. I would say a few hundred, as they were never really massed together and sent out together to die against the great foe. When the Emperor invaded the Vengeful Spirit, alongside Valdor, Rogel and Sanguinius, he brought around 170 Custodians. 70 were his personal Heteron Guard. The other 100 were handpicked by Valdor. Of the Emperor's 70, none would survive. Most would die as soon as the Emperor arrived, their bodies puppeted by Chaos and mercy killed by the Emperor. Another 20 would be killed by the Chaos Onslaught, slowing the Emperor down. The remaining 8 would be turned into Super Saiyans by the Emperor as he possessed them each and turned them into a glowing demigod. However, all 8 of these would also die, mostly from the Emperor ascending to become the Dark King and accidentally destroying them with his aura. The only Custodian to survive that would then be killed by Horus. Valdor was likewise assaulted by an endless swarm of demons, and then after that a huge force of elite Wordbearers and Sons of Horus Terminators. By the time he had fought through to the Sons of Horus, he only had 30 Custodians left, who were then killed one by one until almost none remained. So out of the 170 Custodians that came with the Emperor and Valdor, pretty much all of them were killed. So with the Great Crusade attrition, the losses during the fall of Prospero, the losses during the war in the Webway, the losses during the Siege of Terra, and the losses during the assault on the Vengeful Spirit, I would say comfortably that the Custodian Guard lost between 9,000 and 9,500 of its number. The biggest loss by far was the war in the Webway, where around 8,000 to 8,200 Custodians were killed, while the most deadly day for the Custodians was the assault on the Vengeful Spirit, where they lost around 150 of their most elite in the span of a couple hours. Custodians losing 90% of their numbers during the Heresy is generally what GW seems to go off and reference. It also still allows the Custodians enough strength to properly rebuild and still be a respected force in the Imperium. And rebuild they would, as in the current setting, at least just before the Cornite assault at the Lion's Gate, they would be restored to their full 10,000 strength. They managed this as although the Emperor created the original Custodians, he eventually got too busy and instead trained families of people in a hidden extremely secure lab to create the rest. These families would be born, raised, live and die in this special, mysterious Custodian factory. So hopefully that clears up Custodian recruitment, as I know a lot of the fandom thinks only the Emperor can make new Custodians, thus were confused. As another fun fact, there are actually some Custodians still alive in the current setting who were also around during the Horus Heresy. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then join Dice Dioramas for your chance to take home some awesome World Eater models, as well as prepare for the epic Custodian diorama we have coming up. Hit the subscribe button and hit the real subscribe button for more golden content. Join the Discord for more memes, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.